Hormone therapy was developed to stop a hot flash. That was the only thing it was made for. And it turns out it does all these other things, which are now being discovered, like protect your heart, protect your brain, but there's windows of opportunity. So the time away from your body goes away from estrogen, like however long that is, the higher your risk of disease. And so specifically cardiometabolic disease and dementia and neurodementia. So the loss of estrogen accelerates our path to those conditions: heart attack, diabetes, stroke, increased cholesterol, and neurodementia.
Hey friends, welcome to The Good Life with Michele Lamoureux, a show for women in midlife who want to live happier, healthier, and more meaningful lives. I'm your host, Michele Lamoureux, a self-love coach and the author of Design a Life You Love. And together we're going to be doing just that. Each week I bring on world-class experts, best-selling authors, leading entrepreneurs, and also do solo casts with the intention of inviting you to get connected to what you really desire from your life. This show is produced with love every week. There's inspiration and actionable tips in every episode because I want to see women playing a starring role in their lives instead of living on the sidelines. Be sure to join the Good Life community newsletter over at thegoodlifecoach.com for more inspiration and tips to live your best midlife. And make sure you're following the show on your favorite podcast player. I'm so glad that you're here. Hey friends, welcome back to the Good Life with Michele Lamoureux podcast. Today we are talking about menopause with a leading expert. Joining us today is Dr. Mary Claire Haver, who is board certified in obstetrics and gynecology and is also a certified menopause specialist through the Menopause Society. Dr. Haver has amassed over 3 million followers across social media by posting advice for women going through menopause. She understands that menopause healthcare is in dire need of change. Her educational background and her own experience led Dr. Haver to develop the national best-selling book and online program called The Galveston Diet. And she was on last year to discuss that book. And it was a fantastic interview, which I will link in the show notes. It's worth a listen after you tune into today's conversation, which is centered around her New York Times best-selling book, The New Menopause: Navigating Your Path Through Hormonal Change with Purpose, Power, and Facts. Be sure to share this interview with all of your female friends. That's how we are better informed, better advocates for ourselves, and are better able to navigate this time of our lives. All of the show notes for today will be over at thegoodlifecoach.com, are always available right on your podcast player on your phone with every link that we talked about today, as well as a link to join the Good Life community newsletter, which provides more tips and inspiration to live your best midlife. On that note, let's get into the show. Here we go. Dr. Haver, what is the new menopause?
So the new menopause is my love letter to all of my followers and all of my patients and all of the people I took care of in the past, to explain menopause as I have now come to understand it, which is very different from what those of us in the metaverse and my menopause are calling the old menopause. Kind of the old notions, the old ideas, the old thought process around how a woman should age and what she is allowed and not allowed to utilize for her own health. And we're just not standing for it. And so I wanted to put that all down on paper I probably talked about every single thing in the book on social media, but in little 30-second clips. And so people were begging me to get it all in one place where they could reference it instead of digging through thousands of TikToks that I've made over time, over the last few years.
Absolutely. Well, congrats. I know it's a New York Times bestseller now, which does not surprise me. It's so well deserved. And yes, congratulations. That's phenomenal. I'm sure it's going to stay up there. I think what you just said reflects also the fact that it hit that and it's the third week and you're number one. I saw that you ranked on the top. I mean, that's phenomenal. Women are so hungry for this, and just seeing how much activities around it. Last time you were here, I was like, oh, it seems like menopause is having a moment, but this is truly, it's beyond that. This is a movement.
Right. I feel like this is not a bubble and the bubble's not popping. This is a movement, and women are ready to take charge of the last third of their lives, which we have basically been ignored medically, socially, and women, this Gen X movement and the boomers, I'm kind of right in between the Gen X and boomer.
Yeah.
We're saying, no, we deserve better. And we've worked our butts off to get here. And we have so much knowledge and we're so rich in experience and ready to give our gifts to the world. And we're being hamstrung, so many of us, by menopause. Both, menopause is biopsychosocial, and we are saying, no, we deserve better. And there's something better for us out there. And that's what the new menopause is all about.
Absolutely. And when I read your book and seeing some of the history, how women were treated, I mean, if you go back to Hippocrates, is hysteria the word for ovary? I mean, you'll have to educate us. But the fact that women had lobotomies, were put into mental health institutions just for having a natural transition in their lives, but being totally not important anymore to society after being past their childbearing age it's infuriating. But we hadn't come that far, it sounds like, in many ways, with this bikini medicine and, the way that the medical system has treated women until recently, until you called it your menopause, become very vocal to educate women. And now I feel so much more educated now when I go into the doctors, and that feels good.
And that is our purpose, all of us in the menopause, is providing tools and education so that women can make, I think Dr. Sharon Malone says it best in her book, that if you give women information and educate them, they're going to make good decisions, not only for themselves, but for their families and for everybody else. And what we are trying to do is bring menopause care into 2024.
Yeah.
And have women understand what the effects of losing estrogen, even though it is a natural transition, it is not without dramatic medical consequences for so many of us, besides just the cliche hot flash, which are horrible. I had them,
Yeah.
But what it's doing to our cardiometabolic health, and what an intervention might mean to you for not only, we do live longer than men, but we live 25% of our life in poorer health than our age-matched male counterparts. No, thank you. I don't want to live longer if it's going to be demented and frail. I'm not interested in that.
Yeah.
And so these choices we make now, like, our daughter, how we're talking to our children and the next generation, are really going to be, we can intervene and we can make some changes or change that course so that you don't end up with chronic illness and disease, or put it off for as long as possible. We're all going to die of something.
Right. Well, I appreciate you saying that. And actually, one of the intentions that I'm hoping from this conversation is to really drive that home and to take the ownership, because I do know that, and I'm guilty of this too. I say that I'm a fan of preventative health and all this stuff, but life gets busy. And oftentimes we are prioritizing our children, our spouses, we might have aging parents. And so sometimes we're not taking care of ourselves until we're really not in a good situation. So I'm hoping that some of the information I've pulled out three key areas I really want to hone in from your book. And then everyone obviously can pick it up, and it's comprehensive. It'll be everything. But I also want to just touch upon your journey a little bit too, because a big part of my podcast is about getting women connected to meaning and purpose and not living on the sidelines of their own life. And last time you were here, you were talking about how you had this great practice and then you went through menopause and it woke something up in you. I'm curious, little Mary Claire, I think when we get further ahead, we can look back and see the through line, but do you have a sense of what little Mary Claire had, what her vision was for her life, and how some of the things that you did, or maybe just even your mindset around, I don't know, being in the world, because we talked about how you also were in drama, maybe how some of your experiences have kind of come together to have created this book and this movement?
So when I look back at little Mary Claire and what her gifts were, in high school and middle school, definitely a flair for drama for sure. And I was heavily involved in that in high school. And then, real life got in the way. And I also had a really great scientific brain. And that ended up being my career path. I started out in geology and then medical school and then OBGYN, and then have morphed into this kind of hybrid menopause specialist and educator. But I think, I'm an effective communicator, and I'm able to, what I've always been able to do is take complicated information and break it down into layman's terms so that someone without all my training and background can understand. And I just didn't know that I could do that on social media and build a following based on that. And I'm also a good storyteller. So, and that all just kind of, came together into building out on our social platforms and being recognized as a leader in this space.
I think it's fun because I think it's just the beginning. I do. It's the sense I get. I think it's just the beginning. So it'll be fun to see where all of this goes and, where that through line takes you in the future, where those gifts go. I appreciate you sharing that because I think sometimes we're searching for something outside of ourselves, but it's really those things that have always been within us and then connecting it to something that means something to us. And for you, it was having that menopause journey yourself and going, oh gosh, I'm not taking care of my patients in the way that I need and that they need. And so you dove in and here we are. So talk to us. We've covered it on the show before, but I think it's still important to hear because I think it can be confusing. Take us through the stages of where we are. There's premenopause, perimenopause, menopause. Just give us a picture of what that is.
Sure. So for a healthy woman in her premenopausal years, she has a very predictable reproductive cycle. And it's 28 days on average, could be longer, shorter, still healthy. We're basically the ebb and flow of our estrogen, progesterone, FSH, and LH, these stimulating hormones coming from the pituitary gland that tell the ovary what to do, are very predictable. And so each month, you're going to surge on day X, and then estrogen will rise on day Y. And each month, it's a very EKG looking, predictable ebb and flow. Okay. And then the whole thing starts over. The best way I can explain that.
Okay.
What most women don't understand is that as females, very different than males, we are born with all of our eggs and our ovaries are set for life. That's it. That's all we got. And menopause represents the end of our egg supply. So as we ovulate each month and get that one egg out, we lose about 11,000 in the process. They also deteriorate over time. So when we're born with about 1 to 2 million eggs, by the time we're 30, we're down to 10%. And by the time we're 40, we're down to 3%.
At 30? I had no idea.
We're down to 3% at 40. Lots of people get pregnant at 40, but we are way down. Okay. Then perimenopause represents, so the ovaries will just sit there and do nothing unless they're told what to do. They don't ovulate on their own. They have to receive signals from the pituitary gland called LH and FSH.
Okay. Yeah.
The hypothalamus is another gland in our brain, kind of sits above the pituitary, that is constantly sampling the blood for estrogen. And when estrogen is low, it sends a signal to the pituitary through a hormone called GnRH, gonadotropin releasing hormone. Okay. And that tells the ovary, hey, make that LH and FSH so that the ovaries will ovulate, we'll get our estrogen back up. Okay.
Yeah.
And that goes on each month, predictable, until you reach a critical threshold of egg supply and quality. So wherever that is for you in your perimenopause, you're starting to run out.
Yeah.
Same signals from the pituitary don't work as well. We become resistant to those signals. Okay. So the hypothalamus is like, hey, I don't see the estrogen rise like I used to. Like, what's going on? The pituitary is like, I don't know. I sent the signal. And they're like, send more. So we get a bigger surge of LH and FSH and the ovary finally ovulates. So what happens in perimenopause is we end up with a very chaotic, instead of that nice predictable EKG.
Yeah.
A very chaotic ebb and flow. We get much higher estrogen levels than we ever had, sometimes as high as they are in pregnancy for a day or two. And then you have these massive declines. Now what used to look like an EKG is now a roller coaster trending down, but with a very wildly fluctuating levels. So now you're in a hormonal zone of chaos with a general downward trend of estradiol, and progesterone never kind of gets to where it was, with each ovulation. So the ovulations can get further apart. Estrogen levels are all over the place, and it is a completely chaotic zone.
Okay.
The two systems that seem to get hit the hardest in perimenopause are the brain and, of course, the uterus responding to these wildly fluctuating hormone levels. So 90% of us will have dysfunctional uterine bleeding. Hot flashes tend to start later in perimenopause, but the brain issues with cognition, brain fog, and mental health changes, because the brain does not like chaos in our hormones, because those hormones change our serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine levels, the neurotransmitters in the brain. So we end up, what's going on from our ovaries is chaotic, which is causing chaos with our neurotransmitters in the brain. So women will have, one of the first things that we tend to see is fatigue, sleep disruptions, and we see increasing mental health issues as well as cognition changes well before the period goes wonky. Okay. So that perimenopause is nothing to mess around with. And it is, very, 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 it's a red flag. And so most clinicians don't know this connection. They know about periods getting wonky. They know about hot flashes, right? But the vast majority of clinicians have no idea of the far-reaching consequences of a woman's menopause transition.
Okay. So 2 things I want to ask about that. One is, what percent of women in perimenopause experience the symptoms? And 2, if most clinicians don't know, where should they go so we can direct them to how to find the qualified practitioner?
100% will lose their fertility, and 100% will stop having periods. A period due to a menstrual, due to an ovulation. You could still have vaginal bleeding and not ovulate. So I don't want to say all periods. Women can bleed. And that requires a workup. That's a whole nother thing. So about 80% of women will have musculoskeletal pain and disorders with the musculoskeletal system. 85% will have hot flashes in varying severity. Approaching 90% will have fatigue. Probably 60 to 70 will have sleep disruptions, and on and on and on and on. Okay. And body composition changes. Almost 100% will have a noticeable body composition change. Yeah, that was one of the first things that I noticed. I'm 53. I always forget that one for some reason, which is what brought me into the space. That was my biggest beef, besides the hot flashes, was what was this inner tube doing around my waist and how did it get there? 100%, which is why we have the Galveston diet. So that helps too. And the brain stuff and the fogginess. I was out to dinner with a few friends last night, and one of them kept trying to remember a name. And between the 4 of us, it was kind of comical because we're all sort of there. But I'm 53 and still have a pretty regular menstrual cycle. Mm-hmm. So when I say I don't have really many symptoms, then when you say some of this stuff, I'm like, oh no, I do have symptoms. So I think you had written in the book that a lot of times women don't realize that the symptoms that they're having are actually attributed to perimenopause and going towards menopause. And so they're not actually getting treatment that they need. So let's talk about what kind of options there are and who's a candidate and why. I know you're a fan. You don't like to use HRT as much as MHT. What's MHT stands for? Menopause hormone therapy. Specifically, we use hormones for lots of things. Yes. And so we use birth control, could be HRT, so I don't want to call it replacement as much as we're just therapeutically trying to help the patient. Okay. So we can begin treatment in perimenopause. There's a lot of nuance in how to treat perimenopausal patient. Postmenopausal patients are early, easy. They just replace their hormones. Okay. So when we look at what, hormone therapy was developed to stop a hot flash. That was the only thing it was made for. Wow. And it turns out it does all these other things, which are now being discovered, like protect your heart, protect your brain, protect your, but there's windows of opportunity. So the time away from your body goes away from estrogen, however long that is, the higher your risk of disease. And
Okay.
so specifically cardiometabolic disease and dementia and neurodementia. So the loss of estrogen accelerates our path to those conditions: heart attack, diabetes, stroke, increased cholesterol, and neurodementia.
Okay.
So getting estrogen on board as early as possible will put you back on the aging curve and take you off of the accelerated menopause curve. Are you following me? We're
I
still
totally
aging.
am.
These
Yeah.
diseases will probably still
Oh,
happen
yeah.
eventually, but
Yeah.
they accelerate. And we know it's always going to protect your bones. It's always going to protect your general urinary system. But once cardiac disease starts, it's not great at prevention. It's great
Okay.
at prevention, but not cure, right?
Okay.
And so it's not going to undo atherosclerotic plaque. So we have a window of opportunity there, probably that, at least from the WHI data in the first 10 years, a woman has a significant, like 50% decreased risk of cardiovascular disease and death per year in the form of atherosclerosis.
That's what I was curious about too, because if you don't really have symptoms, you still are going to benefit from
your
the therapy.
bones will always benefit. Your muscles will always benefit. So, yeah.
And do you do blood work? Does a doctor do blood work? Because if you're still in
So,
perimenopause and still have
not
some estrogen,
necessarily. If
yeah.
you're in peri, blood tests are worthless at this
Okay.
point. We don't have a good, because of that zone of chaos.
Okay.
It depends on the day, the time of day, where, whatever. It's like pinning the tail on a moving donkey. Like, good luck with that.
Okay.
So, who's bucking around a football field. So if you just listen to the patient and believe her, and I'll do blood work to rule out other stuff. Sometimes hypothyroidism looks a lot like perimenopause or PCOS or autoimmune disease. I mean, I'm doing blood work, but rarely am I checking hormones. I think that's really misunderstood in perimenopause. And then postmenopause, we're great at diagnosing that. 1 year, no period, over the age of 45, you are a menopausal person. Yeah. So, but if she has an IUD or has had a hysterectomy and I'm not clear, I can't use her period to help guide me, then I'll do blood work. If I don't think she's absorbing her therapy, if we go that route, and but I'm not like routinely checking levels, because if you're 50 and I'm making up numbers, if we're both the same number on a piece of paper, you could feel amazing and I'm still having horrible symptoms. So that is not anything we recommend, is like checking levels at this point.
Okay. So is it, starting at a particular dose of the estrogen and progesterone if you have the uterus, and then adjusting based on how your symptoms are being managed by it? So
there's standardized doses that were developed, and are FDA approved, that most in the menopause will start with.
Okay. All right. That's actually helpful. One of the questions that women have written in before and asked, and I don't think we've covered, is what if you've had breast cancer? Because you mentioned the WHI study, and then it created a lot of fear. Women are confused, I think, about whether or not.
So everyone can use vaginal estrogen. That's local estrogen. You can protect your genital urinary system with vaginal estrogen. So let me just get that out there.
Okay.
Local estrogen does not go systemically. So it's not going to your breast or your brain or your bones or anything else. It's just staying in the vagina. Okay. Every human, every person with a vagina can use vaginal estrogen, regardless of their cancer status. So let me get that absolutely clear.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Then a systemic, it's a nuanced conversation. It depends on stage, age, her needs, her wants, but there's just so much demonization and misinformation. You need a menopause informed provider. So yeah, I have post breast cancer patients who are on HRT and they're thriving and they understand. I can't promise them they're never going to have a recurrence, but that risk is probably low based on age and stage. I have the best in the business I'm consulting with on these patients.
Yeah.
And, and the patients are getting to make an informed choice for their own healthcare. Why are we policing this? Why should be denied the benefits if she understands the risk of recurrence?
Yeah.
So we're not giving patients ownership of this at all. I mean, and just to put it, if men, I hate to keep doing this.
No, but please do.
Make it make sense, Michele.
Yes,
I'm like, if men at the average age of 51 went into complete testicular failure, as we do, and all of the downstream consequences due to that, not just libido, but, bone health, they would lose bone, muscle, so many visceral fat deposition, all the things that we go through, acceleration. I don't think this would be a discussion.
Wouldn't.
Like there would be no, can't I? And there wouldn't be this whole, and I think it's really coming from a place of keeping women in a place that they don't want to be. And I don't think that there's this grand plan to subjugate women, but I think that the way that medicine has evolved in almost all of history was treating women like small men with bikinis. Yeah. And that the only thing women's health was about was, if you look at the funding, I mean, my ACOG article, journal came out. I got it yesterday in the mail. It came out, but it was at my other office and they brought it home. And there were not 10 articles. They usually have about 10, and 9 were for fertility or reproduction and pregnancy. Yeah. And there was 1 for gynecologic surgery, nothing on menopause. This is month after month after month, the same thing over and over again. Like, we are not valued. The money is not spent on us, and how, not only for hot flashes, but like how we as females are different than males. Yes. So the McKinsey group did this incredible review. They looked at 650 studies done on like chronic illness and disease. And only half of them looked at the differences between men and women. So all these blood pressure medicines and all this cardiovascular disease, kidney, all of that was done on male rats and male patients. Women were not required to be in studies until 1993, and because we're hormonal and it's harder to study us.
Yeah.
Rather than, so we have a long way to go, and just having these conversations and, fighting for NIH funding. I think, why isn't half the funding going to women?
Why isn't it? I feel like you and your menopause, you could make it happen, because I think between all of you and everyone who's paying attention, who's tuning into these podcasts, who's so hungry for the information, who's buying the book, if there was some sort of petition and said, listen, we are the,
so
we spell
Jennifer
the
Weiss-Wolf.
Yeah, please.
Is a lawyer. She's at NYU, and she wrote the legislation. She does a lot of legislative work, and she wrote a lot of the period legislation, protecting women in periods and access and all that.
Yeah.
She also wrote the one where all the funding went to women's health, the $100 million, and was involved in the second bill that was 250. So she's the expert on this. And she is putting together how to write your congressman, what to say, how to write to American Board of OB-GYN, American College of OB-GYN, but how to advocate on a grander scale so that we can do legislative change and change within these medical institutions. So I'm excited about that, because, us talking about it is great, but we have to basically make these laws, so that we get protected, and that the funding, which my tax dollars are going to pay, are actually, some of that, a reasonable amount, is going to take care of my health.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So, and our girls' health.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the future. Yeah. It's encouraging. Honestly, everything you're saying is encouraging, because it's obviously going in the right direction. It's just going to take some time, more advocacy, and more education, which is why you're here. Let me ask you, so in your book I feel like there's so many key areas, but something I'm paying attention to that I think is so important. So talk to us about sarcopenia. What is it?
Yeah.
Is there a way to diagnose it, and how do we address it? Because this is significant.
So we humans tend to reach their maximum muscle mass at about age 30, 35, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And then the trend is that we lose muscle and bone strength as we age. And then for females, that accelerates through the menopause transition, where we start moving more into osteopenia and osteoporosis and sarcopenia.
Okay.
So sarcopenia is a significant loss of muscle mass. It's usually diagnosed in the elderly. It's one of the risk factors for frailty. And so I'm blessed in my clinic that I can measure muscle mass with an in-body scanner. So I'm having very frank discussions with my patients about how much muscle mass they have. We all have a critical threshold, and it's different for each of us, where we go into not being able to take care of ourselves, which is what most of my patients fear. Once we get the acute stuff dealt with, the hot flashes, the muscle pain, the night sweats, and we get them feeling better and sleeping and feeling like human beings, then we turn around and focus on the longevity things. Okay, how are we going to keep your muscle strong? How are we going to keep, and that musculoskeletal unit works together. So anything you can do to build muscle will build bone. They just go together.
Okay.
And so I have, no one ever thought of that. And so many of us, because of diet culture and the obsession with thinness, chipped away further at the bone and muscle strength to try to be thin. for some ridiculous ideal we were going for, which had nothing to do with our health. And I was a complete victim of that. Disordered eating, the whole nine yards when I was younger.
Yeah.
So now I'm so focused on building. I just got out of my gym. Like still have yoga pants on with this little top. This is my podcast top.
Perfect. Smart.
And then, And so I threw my hair in a ponytail and put on some lip gloss, and here we are. But I spent an hour in my gym this morning in my garage. It sounds fancy. It is literally my garage, lifting weights and I'm not doing it to look a certain way. I mean, that'd be nice, but I am doing it to stay out of a nursing home for as long as possible.
Yes.
And to climb mountains and decrease my risk of insulin resistance and decrease my risk of dementia. I mean, all of these studies are clearly showing that women who do these types of exercise, live longer and healthier. So that's what we want. I don't want to live forever. I don't want to live without my loved ones, but I don't want, the last 10 years of my life to be marked with horrific decline where my daughters are having to come and take care of me. I don't want to do that to them for as little as possible. And, it happened to my grandmother. My grandfather drove a truck. So this is typical in most families. Again, there are exceptions to everything, but this is kind of what happens. My grandfather drove a truck the day he died. I mean, he was completely functional, living his life. And then he had a heart attack and died. He was not driving the truck when he had a heart attack, thank God. Yes. But, my grandmother spent 8 years in a bed, demented and frail, and had round the clock nursing. So I want to be like my grandfather. My mom is on the same path as her mom. She is having increasing frailty and increasing dementia to the point where we're trying to figure out what to do. And it's texting every day with my siblings on how are we taking care of mom? What is the next, what's the next step? All the things. And I'm like, I don't want to be a burden to my children. I want to be a benefactor. And the decisions I'm making now and what I'm learning now and trying to share with everyone about protein intake and exercise and hormones is all part of it.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying is critical. And this is what I'm saying. When we talk about prevention, this is we got to drive this home so people hear this, including me. I just actually got my first bone density scan yesterday.
Yeah.
And so that was the second thing I wanted to ask you about. But does the bone density scan tell you? So unfortunately, I didn't get my visceral fat or the muscle mass as part of the scan.
So the machine actually measures all of that. It's just the output. So most, if you go to the hospital and have a bone density, they just want to know your bone density, though the scan can tell you all the things. They have to change the output and run the algorithms. And a lot of hospitals aren't set up to do that. Oh. So I found a place in Houston for $99. I walked in, it's the same hologic densitometer that we've had in the hospital for 20-something years, but they actually extract the data and then run the scans for muscle mass and visceral fat as well. In my office, I don't have a DEXA, so I can't do bone density, but I can do visceral fat, subcutaneous fat, and muscle mass. And that's how I counsel my patients. And I advise them to go get a bone density and don't wait till you're 65 or until you qualify.
Yes.
Because you don't want to know you're osteoporotic when you're osteoporotic. You want to know, where you are, but way before that happens, because you can intervene and decrease your risk of fracture, which is about 50% for all women right now.
This is what I want to ask you about, because I honestly find it a little bit confusing.
Double men's. We have double the risk of osteoporotic fracture than a man. Why? Because we're menopausal.
Because of the estrogen loss.
I want to break my leg like a man.
That's the new slogan. That's the new slogan. But can you explain something that you wrote about in the book? Because I'm just a little confused. You wrote, research published in the Journal of Internal Medicine found that 1 in 3 adults aged 65 and over dies within 12 months of suffering a hip fracture. So how do you go from hip fracture to death in a year? I just don't understand. Is it?
Yeah. So
what's happening there?
That's with surgery. If you don't have the surgery, it's 70-something%. It's higher. So that is
why? What
repair? Your decline after hip fracture, because it is so debilitating and you need so much rehab. So you're in the bed. They have much higher incident of blood clots. They have, they can't move. They're not able to exercise. Their muscle is deteriorating on a fast track. Yeah. And it is such a blow to the body that 1 out of 3 will not make it the first year.
Oh my God. These are
Yeah.
numbers women need to know. I mean, you talk about it in the
Yeah.
book, and I was like, oh my gosh. So tell us, if in an ideal world, when is a woman getting, because for me, this I figured was a baseline. I'm still in perimenopause. I had
I would
scoliosis. I
honestly,
wore a
I would
back
want to
brace
know. It's $99 in Houston. I would want to know in perimenopause.
in
Like,
perimenopause. That's what I
don't
figured.
wait till
So
your period stop. I cannot tell you how many patients come in and they're
yes.
like, "Holy shit, I'm 40 something years old and I have osteoporosis." And I'm like, "Let's get to work on that right now." You know, so that's your
Okay.
biggest risk.
That's so perimenopause. So I'm glad I asked my doctor and she said, well, it's not covered by insurance until you're
I don't
65.
care.
That's
That's a
what I
mistake.
said.
And
Yes, that's
everyone, Vonda Wright, like she's the orthopod in the menopause is like,
okay.
bones are silent. I mean, she goes to the OR every week trying to fix people's hips and talks about their bones are like butter or they're not well
Oh,
enough for her to take to the OR because of heart problems or whatever. Like it's devastating. So this is avoidable. We can decrease the risk by 50%, but
yeah.
with intervention.
Okay. So the takeaway, I'm go get your scan, even if your doctor won't do it. I guess I qualified. There's like, if you're under 125 pounds or something, that she did it. But like I
There's
said, I
some
didn't
high
get,
risk conditions
so
like
I, but
yeah.
why, if you're under a certain weight, are you more at risk?
So thinner people
Yeah.
have lower muscle mass because the reason why you're thin is
Oh,
chronic undereating, and yeah, so you have low muscle mass
uh,
typically. Not everyone, of course, not
yeah.
everyone, but
Uh,
the trend is if you are underweight, then you are under muscled and you've lost significant amount of bone density.
Okay, that's helpful because that's just been my body. So if you see osteopenia, so 3 of my areas were osteopenia, 3 were normal. Is that she was saying this looks great? I'm like, but I don't want to see that word. So I don't think that looks great. What's your
So
take on
yeah,
that?
I think I would be, definite HRT. You want to be doing consistent resistance training. You want to make sure you're eating enough protein. You want to consider something like OsteoBoost, what we have in our Fortibone product. Again, I sell supplements. There's a lot of things you can do. You want to check your vitamin D levels, see where they're at. Now, vitamin D supplements have never been shown to decrease the risk of osteoporotic fracture, but low vitamin D is associated with it's a package, right? And so whatever you can do to keep your bones healthier, and creatine. So all in conjunction with the right movement, get a weighted vest. I'm a big fan of the weighted vest. It's such a hack to stimulate that axial skeleton and
Yeah.
force it, send signals to keep it strong.
Okay. This is fantastic. Can we talk cholesterol? I want to get ahead of that. So talk to us because I just generally cholesterol,
HRT, HRT,
HRT.
and
That
fiber,
helps
making
with
sure you're
LDL.
getting plenty of fiber. Yeah. Women on HRT have the menopause transition leads to higher HDL, higher LDL, lower HDL, just from being menopausal with no changes in diet and exercise. And then eating a diet that is rich in foods, rich in fiber is probably the best thing that you can do. Lots and lots and lots of plants.
Okay. Galveston diet.
Yeah. I mean, I look at my plate now and
yeah.
it's like plants and protein, and plants rich in fiber. So I'm, fruits and veggies and processed carbs are just like a little hint here and there. They're just not a thing.
You don't do it anymore.
I just, yeah, I'm eating so much. I don't have room for it because I'm trying to get all my plants in and get
I
my
love
protein
that.
in.
I love that. I love that. Well, it's interesting. Oprah was talking about how she went to 5 doctors for heart
Mhm.
palpitations and nobody was talking to
Nobody
her.
realized. Yeah.
Nobody
Today,
realized.
you probably only 20%, I guess, of cardiology. I'm making this up. But I mean, we know that most cardiologists don't know the connection between menopause and palpitations. It is a vasomotor symptom. It is very, very common and it scares the shit out of women. And they'll
Totally.
go into the ED and they have no idea what's going on. They're being diagnosed with a panic disorder
And
and
then
they're just
given,
menopausal.
and then they're probably given antidepressants or
Yeah,
something.
or propranolol.
Okay. So if you, Dr. Haver, could wave a magic wand and change what care looks like for women, what would it be looking like?
That we separate men's and women's medicine and we understand truly the differences, that it is taught, not that we are, it's called atypical chest pain, the way a woman presents with a heart attack. There's nothing atypical about it. All women present, this is how we present as females. like taking the notion away that we are not little men, that we study men and women separately, how we react, how we develop disease, how we react to different medications. And we know the sex differences. Okay.
Yeah.
That, first magic wand. Number two, that we understand that when our estrogen levels go away, besides just being female, how does that now layer on, and where and when HRT? We don't know. All we know for cardiovascular protection is women were on HRT or not. We don't know at what dose, at what blood level that was optimized for their cholesterol or their blood pressure or their insulin resistance. We need what formulations work better for this. We need randomized controlled studies for all of this, and they're just not happening.
It's not. Is there because
estrogen is cheap. And big pharma will not pay. And the NIH everybody's got their hands in these political pockets and has their little areas of, whatever. But this is all women. We're not a niche. Oh, you're so niched. I'm like, there's no niche here. It's every single one of us.
It's not niche when you write in your book. What's that? No, I love it. By the year 2030, the world population of menopausal and postmenopausal women is projected to increase to 1.2 billion with 47 million new entrants each year. Yeah. Come on. I think the thing is we've got the buying power. I think all the research shows we spend the $31 trillion a year. It's women. We have the power. We just need to know that and start putting the pressure on and saying enough is enough with this. It's nonsense. Just we're done. Yeah. Right now we're both getting
Agree. But the other magic wand is that you can walk into any PCP, including OBGYN, and have an informed conversation about menopause. I don't think every woman's going to choose HRT, but I think she deserves the conversation. And that's not happening.
100%. Where does she find that provider? So give us that.
Right now,
yeah,
it's a crapshoot. So what's your best bet?
Yes.
Go to the Menopause Society, which is menopause.org, and look for a certified provider, because they list everyone who's a member, but not the certified one. You have to dig for the certified, look for the certified check. That means they took the test and passed.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's one way. It's not perfect, but it's one way. Ask your friends who's had a great menopause experience. Who do they go to? Whatever. We have a list of testimonials on our website. That's another possibility.
Yeah. Do you see patients anymore though, or no?
Yeah.
You do.
Clinic.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm taking a little break right now. I have 2 nurse practitioners who are fabulous, but for all the PR for the book, I'm on.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. That makes sense.
But all this PR stuff, it is so incredible. Like going to the book signings and having Q&As after all these speaking events where these women are just like, you've changed my life. You've saved my life. You and the menopause, like talking how they were armed with information and they could advocate and it worked, and and they're so happy and they got their life back. So it's awesome.
It's so beautiful. And that's why I'm so grateful to you. What's a mindset shift? Because that's a big piece of what I talk about on the show. Mindset's everything. What is that shift any woman who's listening today needs to make to feel empowered to care for her health and not wait until something goes wrong?
I'm living my best life. I am helping more people. I am touching more lives than I ever did in my regular job. My regular job is great, but I'm done. I'm healthier, wealthier. I'm a better mother. I'm a better friend. I'm a better partner. Like, this is my time and I want that for everyone. I want everyone to feel like that they can live their best life. And I feel like what society's putting on us and and what the healthcare profession has done, putting us out to pasture and just grow old and be grateful. No. I want as much research and innovation going into this part of my life as went into when I was in my reproductive years. And that is not happening. So changing your mindset about getting bigger, getting louder, getting stronger, getting healthier. Absolutely. You deserve it.
Yeah, that's an important message. Can you share just quickly a day in the life of Dr. Haver? Just, it's
been a little crazy because of
PR, not with PR, when you're not doing PR, because you must be traveling. That must be
so like on clinic days or work from home days, get up early, typically 6, and I would do my meditation and journaling, like, take care of my head and my heart, and then gratitude, and then exercise. So I'd hit the gym and lift weights or do whatever.
What does the exercise look like? I want to get really granular because I think people learn and get inspired. Yeah.
Right now I work out with a trainer, Holly Rillinger, and she's out of New York. So we have this online thing that we do. And I'm doing weight training. So I'm doing really progressive load, heavy lifting, 4 days a week. And then if I'm working from home, I tend to work on my treadmill. So I've turned my treadmill into a walking desk, and I'll throw a weighted vest on for my cardio while I'm reading, researching, writing.
Wow.
I can do it slow if I walk slow, and I can type. Or I take all my Zoom calls where I'm not like doing podcasts, just business stuff on my tread, and it freaks people out. But then they're like, "Oh my God, that's so cool."
Then they're buying one. They're like, "Send me the link."
Yeah, they're like, "I want to do it."
Yeah,
so, so that's been incredible. I, hang out with my husband. My kids are grown and flown. So, and then, days I'm in clinic, I'm seeing patients for 6-8 hours, whatever. So I'm packing up my lunch. I usually pack up my lunch based on what we had for dinner the night before, because we cook most nights. I'm taking that to the office, and at night we are chill. So we just hang out, and we try to hang out with our kids if they're in town, and maybe watch a little TV and talk, and yeah.
That's beautiful. I don't know how you have time to just relax from based on what your schedule. Like, honestly, I'm like, how does she do all the social media, all the writing, see patients? Now you're doing the PR. I was like, I just don't even understand. So I think that's phenomenal that you have the time. Is there anything I didn't ask that you want to make sure to leave the women listening with today?
And menopause is inevitable, but suffering is not. And, you can be healthy without HRT. This is not like a hard sell for HRT, but it's just harder, and it kind of levels the playing field, And so educate yourself. My book, there's other books. There's great, and look at your family history and like what you're trying to avoid, and start setting yourself up on habits and behaviors that will, keep you away from those diseases as long as possible.
Absolutely. And where should I direct the women listening to follow you? Where do you love
Dr. Mary Claire all over social. And then we have a website called The Pause Life, where we have, links to the physicians. We have links to, questions to ask your doctor, how to schedule an appointment, what blood work to talk about, all of that's available on our website.
Let me just ask quickly, because you said about if you don't take HRT, it sounds like HRT has proven benefits, though, that even if you don't have the symptoms, it's worth trying. But if you don't, can you still prevent the things we're talking about, or is it harder?
It's harder. It's much harder. I mean, it is the more than a statin for cholesterol. It is the thing that decreases your risk of a heart attack more than anything. It will protect your bones better than anything, better than Boniva, or any of the bone building medications. You're better off with HRT.
Yeah. And you're a living testament, because like you said, you feel the best you ever have. You look great. You're doing all this amazing stuff. The book, ladies, is The New Menopause by Dr. Mary Claire Haver. It's out in the world, New York Times bestseller. Go pick up a copy. And I will be linking the first interview we did about the Galveston diet. So this way they can actually get, because we dove into, the recommendations you have from that. But thank you for taking the time, for educating my audience, for all the amazing work that you're doing in the world. You're a beautiful soul. And I can't wait to see what's next for you. Truly, it'll be fun to watch where this goes. It's so great. Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Hey friend, I have one request before we sign off today. If you've gained any value from any of the interviews that you've tuned into, would you take just 1 minute and leave a 5-star rating and review over on Apple Podcasts? It's actually how more women can find the show, and I want to continue growing a community of women who are loving themselves and living full on. So thank you for all of your support, and I look forward to being back with you next week. Bye for now.
This podcast is presented for entertainment and educational purposes only. Any information provided is not intended to be a substitute for medical, mental health, or other professional advice. Seek out your trusted healthcare provider or other qualified professional for all matters dealing with your health and well-being. Any opinions or information provided by a guest are their own and not those of Michele Lamoureux or the company.